audience is still bigger than.
All right, I guess we'll get started, huh? Since the clock has struck. All right, good afternoon, everybody, both in person here as well as Zoom land. Welcome to the Munch and Learn for April 17th. Got the date right there. So before we get started with today's presentation, just want to tell you next week, the Munch and Learn will be about artificial intelligence in education and specifically what some of the things that Yavapai College is doing with using AI and providing courses and so forth. So Robin Bryce, who's in charge of those things, will be doing the presentation. She'll demonstrate some of the tools that they use and some of the tools that you can use. And also, because we are Yavapai College, I think we have some library privileges as long as you get your picture taken and get a card. And then that gives you access to use some of these tools. All right, so should be an interesting one. Now, that presentation will be in Clarkdale and, of course, available via Zoom as well. All right, so today's presentation will be about the Verde River. And the presenter is Dr. Gary Beverly. Speaker is Dr. Gary Beverly, who is the Sierra Club Yavapai Group Chair, as well as on the executive board of the Citizens Water Advocacy Group. Right, so they're here to fight for our water rights. It goes by the acronym CWAG. Yeah. Right, CWAG, Citizens Water Advocacy Group, and a multi-decade champion of the Upper Verde River. So thank you for being here. Please hold your questions until the end. And for those of you here, I mean, Zoom people can type in their questions at any time in the chat box. And also you can raise your hand and ask the question at the end of the session. For people in the room, raise your hand. We'll bring you a microphone because not only can other people in the room hear you better, people in Zoom land won't be able to hear you at all if you don't speak to the microphone. All right, so both Joanne and I will have microphones to pass around for the people in here, and please make sure you do that. So with that, I'll hand it over to Gary to talk about the Upper Verde River and what some of the threats are and what we need to do to protect our precious water source in this area.
Thanks, Shay.
You're welcome.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Gary Beverly. I work with the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club is vitally concerned with the future of the Verde River, and I work with the Citizens Water Advocacy Group, which is mainly based in Prescott, and CWAG, that's the acronym for the Citizens Water Advocacy Group. CWAG is concerned with the a sustainable water supply for the citizens in the West Yavapai County and the Prescott Active Management Area, and CWAG is really concerned about the Verde River. So that's my connection between the two groups. And I'll talk some about that connection today. I want to talk about the value of the river, and what its current status is and how we can protect it. So I want to point out that off on the side here is Amina Azuni, the administrative assistant for CWAG, and we've got a few handouts, and you can get on CWAG's mailing list there too. So, all right, so let's just dive in and get started. Here's what I'm going to talk about today. I want to describe to you our efforts to have the Upper Verde declared to be a wild and scenic river. I want to talk about why the river is so important and what its current status is and how we might be able to protect it. So first of all, this map is from the Nature Conservancy, and it shows the status of rivers in the state of Arizona. So here's the Gila River in the orange dot, means it was formerly perennial. There's a flowing section of the Gila here in the Gila box area, but mostly the Gila is dry. It's a dry river bed filled with tumbleweeds and agricultural tailwater that is saline and laden with pesticides. We have harvested the Gila River to support agricultural commerce in the state. That's the main river that drains 2/3 of Arizona. Here's the Santa Cruz River starting in Mexico, coming up here, that has 2 wet spots with treated effluent from Nogales, Mexico, and Tucson. Here's the San Pedro River, which is hanging on by a trickle, very important river. Here's the Salt River, which joined the Gila, east of Phoenix, west of Phoenix, and it has 4 dams on it, is heavily controlled. It never flows to the Gila unless there's a giant flood. So the Verde up here in blue is the only one still standing. It's the only surviving living river in Arizona. Out of Arizona's original allowance of 6 perennial rivers, the Verde is the only one that still is a living river. By living river, I mean that it has perennial flow, that it has natural vegetation on the banks, and that it has natural flood flow cycles. We've consumed all the other rivers in the state for economic development. This river is a green artery pulsing through the heart of Arizona. I just wanted to give this map to kind of lay the groundwork so you can see what we're talking about. Here's Prescott, Highway 89 North, goes up to Ash Fork up here. Paulden, little unincorporated community, is right at the headwaters of the river. The river flows 194 miles down to meet the Salt down here at the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Reservation. It's on the way. It flows through the Verde Valley. So this section here, here's Camp Verde and Cottonwood. This is the Middle Verde. That's the river that the Verde Valley citizens are really familiar with. This is the Lower Verde. Has 2 wild and scenic rivers. This is the Fossil Creek Wild and Scenic River, 16.5 miles, designated in 2009. This is the Verde Wild and Scenic River, starting at Beasley Flat and going on down to just above Sheep Bridge. That's 40.5 miles. That was designated in 1980. What we're trying to do is to do a wild and scenic river here in the headwaters, and I'll talk some more about that. But this is a really important river, and this watershed has 5 wilderness areas in it, 8 inventoried roadless areas, 3 national forests, 2 wild and scenic rivers, 3 important bird areas, IBAs, 1 wildlife preserve, 2 state parks, 1 national monument. There's over 540,000 acres of protected land that we've already invested in the Verde watershed. And so we want to protect the headwaters here. That's where the water flows from. By protecting the headwaters of the river, you are helping protect the rest of the river. So Upper Verde Wild and Scenic River is a very active effort that we have underway right now. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is a federal act. It's the highest form of federal protection of rivers. You have to get it approved by Congress and signed by the president. The National Wild and Scenic Rivers System has over 13,000 miles of rivers in the United States, which is about 2% of the river miles. We don't protect our rivers all that much. We want to add the Verde to it. So here's how the Wild and Scenic River Act protects rivers. It preserves their free-flowing character, so it prevents large dams from. That's not really a concern on the Verde. There just isn't that much water there on the Upper Verde to have big dams, but still, it creates a Federal Reserve water right that I'll talk some more about in a minute. It ensures that water quality is maintained or enhanced. That's really useful. You know, about 1/3 of the water that flows through the Verde Valley comes from this Upper Verde region that we're trying to protect. Really. So this is important to the Verde Valley residents too. The designation as a wild and scenic river will also create a comprehensive river management plan. Now, this is really important. The manager for the wild and scenic river would be Prescott National Forest. That's That's the federal land manager through which most of the river flows. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act requires citizen participation in developing that plan. So the management of the plan will reflect community values. This is unlike most kinds of federal legislation where the feds just say this is the way it's going to be and kind of one size fits all. This doesn't work that way. Here's the other cool thing is it protects a set of outstanding values that are unique to each individual river. So the management plan identifies unique values to that river and manages them in compliance with the community values. So this tends to protect the river as it is or improve it. This is a really powerful designation. So we have a coalition of members working on this. I'm not going to read the whole list here, but Yavapai Apache Nation is a very important partner. They've been extraordinarily supportive of our efforts on this. Sierra Club American Rivers is kind of the leader in this. That's the national organization that focuses on wild and scenic rivers, and a bunch more. So we have a big coalition of national and local conservation groups that's been meeting for like 3 years to make this happen. What we're doing is we have built tremendous community support. We have over 150 businesses in the Verde Valley and West Yavapai County have signed letters of support. In terms of government support, catch this. We have support from the city of Sedona, Camp Verde, Cottonwood, Clarkdale, Jerome, Prescott Valley, Prescott, Chino Valley, Yavapai County, and Governor Hobbs, former Governor Babbitt, 4 chambers of commerce. We got a bunch of support for this, and we have really no express opposition at this point. This ought to be a slam dunk thing to get through Congress. Current condition of Congress, shall we say, is a little bit chaotic right now, so this is being a challenge. We have met with Arizona's senators and representatives in Washington, D.C. 3 times, and we have draft legislation on Senator Kelly's desk. And so we're very close to getting a bill into Congress. This is going very well. So here we're meeting with Senator Sinema. Catch her office here, this 20-foot high ceilings and purple walls. I mean, Senator Sinema was styling when she was in office there. Here we are meeting with Senator Kelly. He's very enthusiastic about this. And then here's Representative Crane we met with. And that's being a more difficult conversation to have. We're working on it. And we're looking forward to bringing Senator Crane on board. So the map here shows that the Wild and Scenic River would go from Paulden down to just above Clarkdale. So it would be at the end of Prescott National Forest boundary. There's a few private properties above TAPCO that would, and those private properties are not included. So it just includes Prescott National Forest and then all of Sycamore Canyon. So it's about 75 miles total. So these are the outstanding and remarkable values that are protected by a Wild and Scenic River designation. You can see recreational activity here. I lead these hikes down the river. So here we are. This was a wet foot hike. Here's a roofed ruin in Sycamore Canyon. There's remarkable cultural values along the river. Probably 6 dozen sites qualify for inclusion in the National Historic Register that would be included and protected as part of this. And here's an osprey. So in terms of scenic values, this is looking up Sycamore Canyon towards San Francisco Peaks in the winter. This would all be Wild and Scenic River. It's kind of a sweet scene. We hired Arizona Echo flights to fly officials, and we took them on an air tour of the canyon, and I took this photo on that air tour. So that's kind of spectacular. The beautiful red rocks here in your area, very eye-catching. Down on the river, here you've got the red rocks, blue sky, white water, green trees, classic primal colors. It's a really beautiful place. There's many more important reasons to protect this other than scenery, though. It's a really important recreational resource. Population grows. We're not making any more land. We need to make sure that people have a space to recreate and do all these things and probably more. So recreational values are super important. And those will not be restricted. They would be improved with the designation. There's a few slides here, some of the cultural sites on the upper river, a lot of rock art. This is a 24-room previously inhabited site on top of a butte right at the headwaters of the river. And there's even some remnants of older cliff structures along the river. So indigenous people have used the river as a transportation corridor and a source of sustenance and a place to live for over 10,000 years. And so that would be northern Hohokam, southern Sinawa, Apache, Yavapai, Prescott, and more. This is a probably Hopi rock messaging site, and this is an archaeoobservatory site. If you stand here at sunrise on December 31st, two things are going to happen. One thing is you're going to be very, very cold. And the other is that the sun will rise up on top of Little Thumb Butte. And this must have had some important significance to them. So lots of rock art around there. Botanic resources. The Verde is some of the best remaining riparian habitat in the state of Arizona. The forest along the riparian area is called a gallery forest. This is composed of like cottonwood, red willow, black willow, box elder, sycamore, on and on. So we want to protect that. Because the other rivers in the state have been dried up, we don't have much of this riparian habitat. By riparian, we mean that the plants along the river are in contact with groundwater. So riparian habitats happen along rivers that have water. This watershed is really rich in wildlife, and this is, to me, is one of the main reasons to protect this with the wild and scenic. So the Verde watershed is 5.8% of the land area in Arizona, yet it has 69% of the vertebrate species in the entire state. That's what you call rich wildlife diversity. And why? Well, because we've wiped out the other rivers. Where are they going to go? 209 bird species, 25 of 28 bats, 17 to 19 carnivores, 6 of 8 native ungulates, and 76% of the reptile genera. So really rich in watershed in wildlife. So here in the pictures, you got a bald eagle. This is a river otter. And here's a beaver dam. And of course, a javelina picking at us through the grass. Why is it so rich in wildlife? What accounts for this? Well, location. So here's the Verde watershed in the light green, and the white areas around this is the border of the Colorado Plateau. Here's the border of the area of the Mojave Desert. Here's the Sonoran Desert, the Arizona, New Mexico highlands, and the Apache Highlands are 5 major ecoregions in the Southwest that all surround the Verde watershed. So it gets the influences of the plants and animals in those watersheds. So that's one good reason. Another reason has to do with geology. The watershed is in a transition zone between the Colorado Plateau, that is the layer cake sedimentary rocks that you see in the Grand Canyon, and the Basin and Range, which is the basalt, the volcanic features that are around. So it has the soils, it has elevation changes, it has water, and water is life. So between the geology and the surrounding ecoregion influences, there's thousands of microhabitats, each of which is home to something. So this is kind of why it's so rich. It's rich in endangered species also. So here you've got there's 19 species listed in the Endangered Species Act in the Verde River watershed. There's an additional 16 species of concern that are listed by Arizona Game and Fish Department and the Prescott Forest. So this is a Mexican garter snake, a little riparian snake. Has critical habitat on the upper river. It's threatened in the Endangered Species Act. Peregrine falcon. This is a yellow-billed cuckoo, which is also critical habitat on the upper river. This is not under the ESA, but I just like the looks of these belted kingfishers because they have a cool haircut. And here's our old buddy, the bald eagle and golden eagles are all over the place up there. So really important area. In terms of fish, Arizona had 33 native fish. 3 are extinct, 19 are now protected by the Endangered Species Act. Where'd they all go? We dried up the rivers. So the important native fish rivers in Arizona now would be Eagle Creek, Yavapai Creek, Fossil Creek, and the Verde River. And so the Verde has 10 of these, and 3 of those are critical habitat ESA listed species. So this is razorback sucker. This is a round-tailed chub, otherwise known as a Verde trout. This is not on the endangered species list, but it's on the watch list. Spike dace, and this is a Sonora sucker, which is also not on the ESA, but it is a weird-looking fish. I kind of like it. You know, he sucks microinvertebrates off the river bottom. They're in 3 important birding areas at Tuzagoot, Watson Lake, and the Upper Verde Wildlife Area, with nesting sites for great blue heron, golden eagle, bald eagle. So more rich in wildlife. And then I just like this picture. This is a black-tailed rattlesnake, and he's telling me not to get any closer, and I didn't. This is with a telephoto lens, so. So the Wild and Scenic River will protect or improve recreation and other outstanding remarkable values. People, though, are concerned about restrictions, but so in the Wild and Scenic River, there's no restriction on hunting, fishing, or other recreational activities. It doesn't constrain private landowners from controlling the access to their land or what they do on their land. So it doesn't cause landowners any problems. It actually helps them. In terms of water rights, it does create an in-stream flow right that is only useful. In-stream flow rights keep water in the river, and the in-stream flow rights that would be created by this would be junior to every other water right downstream, and so this really isn't going to help much. And it is certainly not a threat. So what's the river like currently? One threat is trespass grazing. The Forest Service has kept cows out of the river since 1993. Cattle grazing in the riparian area is one of the worst things you can do to destroy. It's one of the best ways to destroy a riparian area. So Prescott National Forest is doing a good job in controlling this. There's always incursions that Sierra Club monitors this and notifies them, and the forest gets the ranchers to fix the fence and get them out of there. A lot of the trespass grazing problems we have is with off-highway vehicles cutting fences, leaving gates open. So it's not necessarily the cow's fault, but this is a continuing problem we have to deal with. Careless campers is one of the huge problems that we have to deal with down there. And I want to show you one example here of how the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act really helped constrain this. So here you see on the right, at Perkinsville Bridge, campfire with trash, beer cans. This is not the way you're supposed to treat public lands. So this is at Perkinsville Bridge. Prescott National Forest didn't manage this well, and it really created a public health hazard. So people were creating roads. There should not be a road there under the bridge. Cars parking there. There shouldn't be cars there. There's a chainsaw on the ground. They use that chainsaw to cut the roots off of riparian trees for firewood, cutting green trees for firewood. This is what it should look like. This is what it does look like. So there was a problem here. There was illegal shooting going on. There was dams being built across the river, which interferes with the aquatic habitat. This is critical habitat for native fish. You shouldn't be doing that. A lot of graffiti on the bridge abutments and stuff. Just a lot of problems. Each of those red spots is a pile of human feces. On the 4th of July, I could go down there, there'd be 40 RVs and people just doing their job off in the trees. When I showed this to the forest supervisor, he said, okay, I understand. We just cannot tolerate this. So the Sierra Club, we paid to put a porta potty in there to stop this. And we got the forest to close it off to day use. And so as a result, there's no more human waste down there. There's very little trash. People still go down there and spend the day. It's accessible to public, but it's not being mistreated. This was possible because the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, Prescott Forest determined that the river was qualified for Wild and Scenic River status. So they then had to manage it as though it was. And so the scenes of careless camper destruction you saw are not compatible with that. So when we pointed all this out to them and showed them the regulations, they fixed it. So we work well with the forest and they're responsive. No complaints there. But we got it fixed. Then the Sierra Club went in, we painted out all the graffiti. We had a paint party. And then we had Don Decker, the guy with a feather, who's a Yavapai medicine man or religious leader. Used to work for Yavapai College over in the Prescott campus, actually. When I worked there, we both worked at the college at the same time. So he came and did a ceremony, and we blessed the river and tried to erase the sins of the past. So that was pretty fun. Another threat is non-native aquatic species. I said that the river is an important site for native fish preservation. The big threat to that is non-native species. So here is a red-eye bass, here's a green sunfish. These were both species that were introduced by Game and Fish decades ago in an attempt to establish a cold water sport fishery. These fish predate on native fish, and so they've really harmed native fish populations. There's other non-native aquatic species. This is a red shiner minnow, an escaped bait fish. This is a yellow bullhead, a type of catfish, big old bullfrog, and a crayfish. These are omnivorous and they eat fish eggs and vegetation off the bottom and just compete with the native fish for habitat and food supply. So these non-native aquatic species are a huge problem. And so normally when we do fish count surveys, we walk up and down the river and net the fish and measure them and determine what species are there, we find 80% non-natives and about 20% natives. Except now it's even worse than that. The Rocky Mountain Research Service in the Flagstaff office issued a report and said that they couldn't find any native fish populations in the first 10 kilometers, 6 miles of the river. Game and Fish did additional surveys, found one native fish in the first 18 miles of river. This section of river, like 8 years ago, was so thick with native fish you'd trip over them if you waded across the river. And now there's none. So things have really changed for the river. And a lot of this is due to threats to the flow in the river. And so this is the big deal. I mean, these other threats we're talking about, we can handle the people, we can handle the cows, we could handle the non-native aquatic species. But keeping water in the river, you know, no water, no river. So this is really basic. So I want to talk a little bit about about the flow in a river. So, here's a chart, a graph. So the vertical axis here is the flow in the river. This is data from the U.S. Geological Survey at the Paulding gauge at river mile 10. And so this is a logarithmic scale. And this is the date. This is just a sample water year dating from October to the September 30 in the late 70s. But this is just a typical thing that happens. So you can see that there's a low flow that continues generally along all the time. And that's the base flow of the river. But it is interrupted by these spikes in flow. And some of these quite high. In this case, it's 6,200 CFS. This is 20 CFS down here. And this rise happened in about an hour. So otherwise known as a flash flood. This is typical behavior for southwestern desert rivers. This is in the winter from winter storms or rain on snow events. These spikes in flow are from summertime precipitation events. Notice that in every case there's a sharp spike and it decays down to base flow very quickly. So the base flow used to be in this time about 20 cubic feet per second. And some of these flood flows are thousands. So this 6,000 CFS was actually a small one. In February of 1993, the peak flow was 23,000 CFS. So you know how big the Colorado River is below Glen Canyon Dam? How big does it flow? Any ideas? Depends on how much air conditioning Phoenix needs, right? But someplace between 8 to 12,000 in that range. So there was like 2 or 3 Colorado rivers coming down the Verde, you know. Here's what it looks like. So there's sound coming out of my computer, probably not that you'll hear, but it's just like white noise and it's not too great to see. But yeah, so this is about a 9,000 CFS flood that comes over Sullivan Dam at the headwaters of the river. And so, yeah, this river can really get to moving. And of course, after the storm, it's just nice out there, right? So under natural conditions, the way the aquifer works is that you have precipitation that falls on the ground. Some of that evaporates. Some infiltrates into the ground surface and joins groundwater. The groundwater is below the water table. That's the upper level of the saturated zone. That groundwater moves, it flows downhill to a river or stream. So there's a connection between rain, groundwater, and stream water. Now, when you put a well in there, things change. Groundwater pumping actually captures stream flow. And this is what we're really concerned about with the threat to the flow in the river. So you have a well in here that's pumping water out and sending it to some city. And so all of a sudden, the water level around the well declines, what we call a cone of depression. And the water flow, it used to flow towards the stream, but now it can actually pull water from the stream into the well. Groundwater pumping captures stream flow. Pumping lowers aquifer levels and diminishes base flow in the river. Verde Springs, which is the headwaters of the river, the beginning of perennial flow, is really sensitive to that. Another thing that reduces base flow is climate change. And this is a big issue that, at the time. So what happens is that higher temperatures cause more evaporation. When it rains, precipitation in higher temperatures more evaporates, less is recharged, and less moves into the river. So climate models predict for the Big Chino watershed about a 10-degree increase by 2085. Hey, Phoenix weather is coming at us. No significant change in precipitation. So that increased evaporation increases the transpiration from plants, decreases soil moistures, decreases recharge, decreases base flow in the river. This is not under our immediate control. There's not much we can do about this right now, but we have to recognize that the river is very fragile and vulnerable due to these climate change effects, and so we need to be really careful. So if we look at the Paulden stream gauge and try and see how the base flow is changing over time, we get a graph like this. See, in the mid-1990s, the base flow of the river started declining really steeply. This 1990s, at this time, we see an uptick in temperature. Well, I've got all kinds of charts and graphs I'm not going to bother you with on this, but increased temperatures, increased groundwater pumping have reduced the base flow of the river. It declines at about a third of a cubic feet per second per year. So at that rate, in 3-4 decades, we're going to have a dry river. This qualifies for crisis. The river has flowed in its current course for 2.5 million years. We're fixing to destroy it in less than a century. I think that's immoral. This is the kind of place that'll get dried up. So, this is Perkinsville Bridge. Does everybody know where that is? Everybody been to Perkinsville Bridge? It's like River Mile 26 on the river. And this is the Upper Verde from Paulden down to Clarkdale. Here's Sycamore Canyon. Here's Oak Creek over here. So this is a Google Earth view from like 60 miles up. This first 25 miles of the river is what's most threatened because the only source of water for it are these two springs, Del Rio Springs and Verde Springs. Del Rio Springs was the traditional headwaters of the river. Del Rio Springs is part of the Little Chino Aquifer. And so water recharges into this watershed from the mountains that surround Prescott, the Bradshaw Mountains, and Mingus Mountain here. And that groundwater moves north, flows downhill, and surfaced at Del Rio Springs. It was the only outlet for the water from the Little Chino Aquifer. About 14% of the river that flows down the 14% of the water that flows down the river comes from the Little Chino. Del Rio Springs has declined since the 1960s. It's now at about 5% of its pre-development flow because Prescott, Chino Valley, and Prescott Valley pump water out of the Little Chino. Groundwater that's naturally destined, moving north to come out at Del Rio Springs and feed the river, that groundwater is now being pumped up and sent to Prescott and Prescott Valley for municipal purposes. So groundwater capture has captured stream flow. There's a perfectly great example that's occurred within our lifetime. It's now captured 95% of the flow of the springs. That's what we're worried about happening in the future in the Big Chino Aquifer. So this is the community of Paulden, And up northwest here, this would go up to basically Seligman. You know, this aquifer crosses I-40. So Verde Springs is now the beginning of perennial flow. And that's and the big groundwater in the Big Chino is 80 to 86% of the water that flows down the river. So pumping 1,000 acre feet of water out of the Big Chino aquifer is going to make 1,000 acre feet less water down the river. It'll take years for that to show up, but that's what happens. So groundwater pumping in the Big Chino is the most serious existential threat for the river. And that's a huge problem because that groundwater pumping in the Big Chino can dry up the first 25 miles of the river, some of the finest surviving riparian habitat in the state of Arizona. There's three types of groundwater pumping that compose this existential threat. One is just domestic wells, population growth and development in the Paulden area. So this is a growth vector in Yavapai County, and that in 100 years, the standard growth up there could pump enough water to dry up the river. This is a responsibility of the Yavapai County Board of Supervisors to control that through zoning, et cetera. And we're working with them on that. The other threat is agricultural pumping in the Big Chino. And this is a huge issue. You know that in the state of Arizona, there's big ag has moved in from the upper Midwest into the area around Wilcox and Douglas and caused huge problems in the Sulphur Springs Valley there for groundwater. A lot of wells going dry. In Kingman, farmers moved in out of the San Joaquin River Valley and planted pistachios and almonds and alfalfa and stuff, and groundwater pumping in Kingman area increased over 25,000 acre feet a year, just like that. And that's now an irrigation non-expansion area. So if something like that happened in the Big Chino, and there already is some ag you see up in there now, that could dry up the river. That responsibility for that's the Arizona State Legislature. The Arizona water law outside of active management areas is very simple. Anybody can pump as much water as they can put to beneficial use. There's no limit, no reporting. It's open season. You can even be a foreign company, foreign country, and do that. And we saw big problems with that in southwestern Arizona. So Arizona water law is ultimately responsible for creating the conditions to destroy this river. The other threat is municipal pumping. The Arizona legislature gave Prescott the ability to transfer water from the Big Chino Water Ranch into Prescott and Prescott Valley. The legal authorization to export water is about 18 to 24,000 acre feet. The pipeline is designed for 12,000 acre feet. The current river flow is 10,000. This project alone could kill the river. The Arizona legislature set this up in 1993 with no thought for environmental impacts, none at all. So past careless decisions are creating a huge problem for this last surviving river in the state. So conclusion here is that the Verde River is now diminished. Its flow is less than half of its pre-development flow. It's ecologically degraded. Native fish are extirpated from the upper 18 miles. We've just lost half of one of Arizona's 4 remaining native fish streams. That's a serious issue. Legally permitted groundwater pumping in the Big Chino will dry up the river. The last one we've got. Groundwater pumping has to be constrained in order to maintain base flow. The federal government can't do this. The federal water law defers to the states. There is no federal water law. There's some case law, but basically water management is handled by all the states individually. So Wild and Scenic River won't protect this because the Wild and Scenic River area boundary does not go up into the Big Chino Valley. It's just along the river. So, you know, the choice is up to us. It's our future, and it's under our control. Do you want our rivers to look like this or like this? Basic choice. So the solution to this is that we begin to act as stewards for our natural resources, not as owners that exploit it. And I want to point out that there's two handouts over here on the table. One is an op-ed I wrote for the Prescott Courier about stewardship, and the other is a 11 reasons to protect the river. So kind of patterned out. Who was that TV show that always had the tin? I forgot his name. He's gone now. Anyway, so fundamentally, this whole thing is a political problem. You know, there's a solution. We could deal with this if we had politicians that paid attention to the problem and had the courage to take steps to deal with it. No politician is going to take steps to deal with these issues unless they know that the public is supportive. And so you need to vote for people that know about this and care about this and will do something. It's fun. It's basically in your hands. You need to vote for water. So solutions. So this next session, I'm going to have introduced the Verde River Preservation Act, which will incorporate existing mitigation requirements into state law. Prescott Valley have promised that they would mitigate any impacts to the river caused by their pumping, but that's not legally defined. I want to put it in state law. And so it would require mitigation for all groundwater exports and protect the water quality. And that would be under the oversight of ADWR. So they've already agreed to that. There shouldn't be any problem getting this through the legislature. Oh, man. I can't believe I say things like that sometimes. It'll be a huge problem. And I can go into great details about why. So we've got a new state park set up at the headwaters, the Verde Headwaters State Park. It may be named Del Rio Springs State Park. It'll be years before it opens to the public. But this last year, we just had the state supplied some funds. The Nature Conservancy supplied funds. Yavapai County supplied funds to purchase 720 acres of private ranch land surrounding the headwaters of the river to make for a historical state park. It's the only state park in northwestern Arizona. And so that won't protect any water rights, but it does focus attention on the river. And so it's kind of a great PR move. So the CWAG, the Citizens Water Advocacy Group, we've got a website that has 100 videos of our programs. And there's September last year, we had a video on the state park. The Trust for Public Land is the national NGO that engineered this. They're really a great group. And they made this possible. So the Michael Patrick from the Trust for Public Land gives that presentation. So go to cwagaz.org, cwagaz.org, and look in the video archive, and you'll find it. Another solution would be conservation easements in the Big Chino. So there's a bunch of big ranches up there, and if they subdivide and develop, that'll consume a lot of groundwater. So the Nature Conservancy and SRP got a grant from the National Resource Conservation District to purchase conservation easements up there. Conservation easements are a willing seller, willing buyer thing. The seller sells the rights to develop the land to the buyer and holder of the conservation easement. And the landowner can continue to ranch and do what they have been doing. They just sell the rights, the development rights. So this is a great tool. It preserves open space, prevents development, and limits new agriculture. It prevents increasing in consumptive water use. It restricts groundwater pumping in the Big Chino, which threatens the river. Problem, federal funding for this is now suspended as of last week. Another solution is to transfer other developable land to public ownership. So in the northwest area of Prescott National Forest, brown squares in there are, this is checkerboard land, that's part of Yavapai Ranch. And so we had a plan to purchase 41,000 acres of checkerboard land and transfer it into Prescott Forest ownership. It's a 5-phase plan. We've completed the first 2 phases. Funding for the rest is now threatened. So we have some forward-looking solutions that'll do part of the problem, but recent federal funding cuts have thrown these into disarray. The Sierra Club has applied to Arizona Department of Environmental Quality for Outstanding Arizona Water Designation. Oak Creek has that, by the way. And so you can see Oak Creek is OAW, but it's now impaired for E. coli, so that outstanding Arizona water protection is causing corrective measures to be made on Oak Creek. This would be the Verde River through the Verde Valley. That's also impaired for E. coli, and that's also being monitored and remediated. Here's the Verde that we're concerned about. And it's green. It attains Clean Water Act standards for body contact. Sycamore Creek does too. We've applied to have the ADEQ to have those designated. ADEQ is not acting on them. There's a lot of inaction. So the government can help us with the Wild and Scenic River, but the government is not helping us with some of these other protective measures. Again, I'll come back to you, the voters, that you need to help us. You need to push on this. So I'd ask you in closing here, just to support the Upper Verde Wild and Scenic River. We've got a website. Here's the web address, and you can go there, sign a petition of support, throw some money at us if you want, and keep track of, get on our mailing list and keep track of progress. So that would be one thing to do. The other thing to do is, this is the Citizens Water Advocacy Group's webpage. You can see the video archive link right here. And so you can get all kinds of videos there. And this is focusing on the Verde River and on the Prescott Active Management Area. So we have two main sections. There's a ton of information in this website about that. CWAGAZ.org. And then Sierra Club, this is the Grand Canyon chapter of the Sierra Club, is very invested and involved in this, and that's another place that we could use your support. So with that, I'll be happy to take some questions. I wish I could end on a higher tone here. You know, we have a really remarkable resource, and we just have to get to work a little bit on it to preserve it. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Your presentation was really good. We appreciate that. My question is, when people get to go to this river, is there signage that says, if you carry it in, please carry it out?
Well, in the Verde Valley, I think it's some of the river access points there is. On the Upper Verde, the section between Paulden and Clarkdale,
Yeah.
you know, it's hard to get to. It's not well known, which is one reason I like to show all the photos and give this talk. It's greatly underappreciated. It's very difficult to get to. There's like 2-track ranch roads that are high clearance, 4-wheel drive with really cranky gates to get to it. I mean, it really flows through a very wild area. It is open to public access, and where there are public access points, for instance, at Perkinsville Bridge, Now those signs exist. Yeah, but before they didn't.
My other question,
Actually, can I interrupt real quick? Gary, can you stop sharing so that people can see you?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Eli Crane, since we have the senators in support, Eli Crane is this area's congressman. Has he given any reasons why he could possibly not support it?
Well, I've talked to Representative Crane about it. Our team has talked to him much more. So he's well informed on this. He's aware of the broad support that exists for this. He hasn't come out to support it. He hasn't said he's not going to support it. He's just being very, very careful. And so we will continue to work with him, and yeah, people could help. So we may be starting a public campaign on that soon. That's one of the next thing our team is going to consider. So it's very important to have Representative Crane's support for this. There's a custom in Congress that public lands designation bills have to have the approval of the local member. So it's not a rule like a filibuster rule or something. It's just a custom, but it's pretty strong. So that is our remaining task, is to convince Representative Crane to sign on. And so we're optimistic that'll happen. Sometimes just takes time.
All right, we'll take a question from Zoom. Do not have any yet. Okay.
I work as a part-time ambassador for the town of Clarkdale at the RAPS, TAPCO RAP, which you mentioned. And I'm wondering if Freeport McMoran, the gold and copper company, is an advocate, could be a possible partner. The town of Clarkdale leases the river access points from Freeport McMoran, as you probably know. So I'm wondering if there's any possibility of getting them to be an advocate. I know they're a mining company, so maybe that seems counterintuitive. But and a remark about the signage there is at the TAPCO RAPS and at the beach at Tuzigoot, some reminders about that. So I'm wondering if Freeport McMoran could be a partner.
Sure.
And the kayakers who use the river so frequently.
Sure. We have had conversations with Freeport McMoran. They haven't decided one way or the other yet, so that's in progress. Their property lies downstream of the boundary for the Wild and Scenic River, so there's no direct physical contact with them. And the Wild and Scenic River tends to maintain flow in the river, so really, in our view, there's no reason why they couldn't get some brownie points and support this. It certainly wouldn't harm their operation. So we're working on that. So when you gather support, you start with the easy parts and then you work around, then you take all that support to the people that are more difficult to convince, and you say, but look at all the other support we have. And that's what we're doing. So we're not done yet. We won't be done until Congress approves this.
I'm wondering too if there would be an opportunity with some of that signage that's at Tuzigoot where the kayakers disembark,
Right.
or TAPCO where they embark, to enlist some support for volunteers for the Del Rio Springs Park, things like that.
Well, possibly. At this point, the Del Rio Springs Park is fenced off and closed to the public. And the State Parks Board is just beginning. They don't have much money to work on this, so they're doing archaeological surveys and kind of the groundwork for it. It's not open to the public. They are working to develop a plan for what to do there. So I think it'll be maybe 10 years before that's a functioning park. Now, it all depends on state budgets. You know, it all gets down to money. So um, I don't, state parks is not in a phase right now where volunteers would be helpful. It's kind of closed, but at least it's protected. It's not going to get developed. So this is all good.
Okay, from Zoomland. First of all, there's several thanks and a comment saying excellent and eye-opening presentation. And the question I have is, are there any state water laws that you would advocate?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know, so Arizona water law was the Arizona Groundwater Management Act in 1980 created active management areas, and the active management areas have not performed well. So that those laws need a lot of revision, and I could talk for like 3 hours on the details of that. It's fundamentally those laws tend to facilitate development, not to protect water, although their stated purpose is to preserve our groundwater. But what's actually happening is that groundwater levels are declining and development continues apace. So the laws are not doing what they were advertised to do. Outside of the active management areas, management areas are like, I don't know, 15% of the state area. Outside of those areas in almost all of Arizona, the groundwater law says you can pump as much water as you can put to beneficial use. Even if you dry up the well next door, no problem. So those laws need to be revised, and that's under major discussion in the legislature right now. It has been for the last couple of years. There are some efforts known as a Rural Management Act. And there have been several versions of it with slightly different names, but the idea is that it would create a local board that could exercise management over a groundwater basin that's not an AMA. The versions of these bills that have been considered that have been given committee hearings have been absolutely horrible. They have tended to remove the possibility of rural groundwater management. I mean, in principle, the people in a rural area are better able to manage their water than people in Phoenix. You know, now some oversight from ADWR to make sure that it's really management. That's totally necessary. But, you know, we've got a situation where the House Natural Resources Committee that's chaired by Representative Gail Griffin just blocks all the good water bills and lets all the horrible water bills go through. That those water bills then tend to favor development and big ag. And so efforts by the legislature to fix some of the rural water problems in Arizona have so far not been helpful. They have been counterproductive, and Governor Hobbs has vetoed them. So this is an ongoing effort. And once again, it's to the voters to elect leaders, political leaders, that will do the right thing and protect our water. I can say that we don't have it now.
Yeah. So I noticed that SRP was on there as one of the partners, I think, in one of the initiatives. I can't remember which one it was, the Salt River Project. I'm just curious. I can kind of understand why they would be interested in, supporting the Verde watershed in general in terms of flows. But I'm curious about that relationship, and are there downsides? Is there some political clout they can also offer for some of these efforts?
Yeah, SRP is a powerful quasi-governmental organization, and they could be very helpful. They have not so far signed on to supporting our wild and scenic river, despite other contracts that specify that they would. And we're continuing to talk to them about that. Again, they haven't come out in active opposition, but it would be helpful if they supported it. So that's a really complicated question to answer that is a little bit sensitive, so I'm just going to stop there. But if anybody from SRP is listening, we would appreciate you doing the right thing.
Okay, I have several more, but Sri will cut me off whenever time is up. The next one is there was an effort back in the late 80s and early 90s to get this designation for the upper Verde, but there was a lot of opposition, I think, from the ranching community. What has changed since then?
Well, that's true. Actually, in 1980, the Verde Wild and Scenic River was approved, and that would be from Beasley Flat down to above Sheep Bridge. The original proposal for that included the upper Verde and the lower Verde, and that was sent out for public comment. And there was a lot of opposition from private property owners on the upper Verde to this. And so that was removed from the Wild and Scenic proposal at that time. There was a lot of support for it as well. Ranchers were part of the opposition to it. Traditionally, the ranching community is opposed to any kind of public land designation, whether it be a river or wilderness or a park or whatever. They don't want any interference with their ranching activities. Now the situation has changed. A lot of the land, private land on the river has come under public ownership. And so the Trust for Public Land brought in the Packard Ranch at the confluence of Sycamore Creek and the river. We just picked up 83 acres of Rio Verde Ranch on the upper river. We've got the state park on the upper headwaters. There's some private groups that own land along the river that are conservation groups. So the private land ownership situation has really changed. There's a lot of ranchers with grazing permits along the river. We've talked with them. Basically, their response to this now is, it doesn't bother me one way or the other. The Forest Service has prevented grazing in the riparian area since 1993. So that's not going to change, and so that's a done deal. There's not much. So the ranchers aren't coming out and saying, yay, do this. But they're not saying, no, don't do it. And that's fine. So the situation has changed since the late 80s, early 80s. And that's good.
Okay. Gary, could you please share with the audience about the hikes that are available along the Verde?
Add to that, one of the questions is dog-friendly hikes in addition to hikes.
Are the hikes dog-friendly?
No. I do lead guided field tours in the upper river once a month, and you can get those at the Sierra Club website and sign up for them. The hikes occur in the upper Verde River Wildlife Area, which is owned and operated by Arizona Department of Game and Fish, a marvelous public service and a wonderful spot. Game and Fish rules. It's a wildlife area, so dogs are restricted there.
And they're free.
They're free. The hikes are free.
Okay, next question I have. Many years ago, they think it's called NRCD, ran free river trips on the Verde to try to expose people largely from the metro area to experience this beautiful treasure. The idea was if they came and enjoyed the Verde, they might become advocates and or stewards of the river. but perhaps they would contact their state reps to introduce bills, vote for protection of the Verde. This did require funding, but maybe some similar program could be introduced to expose citizens to the Verde.
That's a great idea. And the river access points that were created by the town of Clarkdale and the Arizona River Adventures. Who's the tour group that Doug?
Mayor of Clarkdale, Doug Von Gossig, the retired mayor of Clarkdale, runs a ranger program on the river whereby they pick up trash that kayakers have left and do a little bit of education. The Verde River ambassadors at Clarkdale also take his courses and travel down the river with him from time to
Right.
time. And I think his guided educational tours are still available.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful service. He's just doing a great and good thing. Hats off to Doug Van Gossig for doing that. He's been a big booster and protector of the river for a long, long time.
Final question.
Okay, I have one left. Is there any hope to restore water flow to other rivers such as the Gila? I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Gila. Gila, thank you.
Well, you know, when water, we don't take away rights in this country, at least until recently, maybe, but water rights and things are not, once they're granted and that use is approved, how do you get rid of it? You could buy it, you know, so all the irrigation and stuff that's along the Gila and the other rivers, you'd have to buy the farmland out. You'd have to buy the irrigation rights or something. This would be hugely expensive. I think cities could use a lot less water through water conservation. There's other programs we could do with stormwater recovery and recharge. We could manage our water much better, but as far as restoring rivers that have been damaged, this is very, very, very difficult. It's almost a one-way street, unfortunately. There's a group working on the San Pedro that's been working there for decades, just trying to stem the decline. And that's been a nip and tuck battle. There's another group working on the Santa Cruz River that has made some progress on the upper Santa Cruz using treated effluent. And there's some native fish in there now. But once it's gone, it's really, really hard to get back. The best thing is to don't screw it up to start with. It's much cheaper and easier to preserve a resource than it is to restore it.
All right, thank you for excellent presentation. And, you know, it's one of the treasures that we here. So Gary has educated us on that, and I guess it's to do everything we can to preserve what we have.
Yep.
All right, so thank you all for coming.
Thank you.